Hey everybody, how's it going? This is McKay Tabs here again, and I'm excited to help you with another lesson on Pro Tools. Hopefully at this point you're all starting the class and having a good experience so far. Please do reach out to me if you're having any frustrations or any problems, and I would love to try and help you through those things. Also, a few of you have reached out to schedule a time for a virtual office hour with me, and I really appreciate that. It was great getting to know you a little bit. And I'd just like to continue to encourage any of you who want to do that and to take a minute to get to know me a little bit and let me to get to know you a little. So let's get started for today. Today we're going to talk about the tools in Pro Tools, the different modes for working in Pro Tools, and we're also going to talk about starting a session and how to start up your first Pro Tools session. Some of you might already know some of this stuff, so it's it might not be totally brand new for you, but some of you might not. And then again, there might be some things of this you don't know, and maybe this will help to fill in some gaps. Well, let me start by sharing my screen with you. Whoops. Okay, share my screen, go into desktop. There it is. All right, so currently I already have a Pro Tools session up and going. And let's start by talking about some of the main tools. So if you look up here in this corner, ooh, I can zoom in. Yeah, that was cool. So let's see, let's drag this down a little bit and then zoom in. Okay, so if we look up here, here's the main tools in your toolbar that we use a lot. I'm gonna deselect what I have right now, and oh, there we go. Well, this first one is the zoomer tool, and you probably use this in other applications, so it's not totally new to what you're trying to do with Pro Tools. But with that zoomer tool selected, you can zoom in. And if you want to zoom out, push Option and click while you're pushing Option. So click on it and then push Option down, and I'll just show you on my keyboard. I've just got Option clicked, or I'm just pushing it down on my keyboard, and then that lets you zoom back out. So I'm going to zoom back in for a second. It's about right there. So anyway, that's a place you can go to zoom. And then right next to that, you have this guy right here. This one is called the trim tool. And the job of the trim tool is to trim the clips. Sometimes the clips are too long, and so it's a good idea to trim them. Anyway, a clip is what you see right here, like this in red. That's a clip. So let's say that that's too long. I can use this trim tool here, and I can just click on the end of it and I can shorten it. I should be able to shorten it. Oh, that worked. Yeah, that was a big one. But yeah, you just click on the end and then you drag it shorter. And the vice versa, if that is true, if you click on the end, you can also drag it longer to where it used to be. And that's where it was when I started. So anyway, that's what the trim tool does. The next tool over here is the selector tool, and that's where your cursor is. So it looks like an eye, and you can move your cursor around so that if you're looking for a specific point to work on, for example, here's bar 10. You can see right here it says bar 10, and I can drop this cursor right on bar 10, and now that's where that's where my new start point is. If I push start, it's going to start from right there. And then there's the grabber tool. The grabber tool is very handy. It looks like a hand. It's a handy tool, and you click and you can drag things to a new location. In this case, here's a MIDI click. I can click on that and I can drag it to the track below it if I want to, and I can change it right there. Although if I do that, it won't sound the same. So anyway, that grabber tool is kind of most important, not most important, but very important. But the truth is, these three tools together right here, the trim tool, the selector tool, and the grabber tool, those are the three main tools you use most of the time when you're working in Pro Tools. And sometimes it's a hassle to say, oh, I gotta grab, now I gotta select, let me get my selector. Okay, now it's time to trim, let me get my trim selected. Sometimes that's a lot of back and forth motion, so there's a shortcut. And the shortcut is clicking right above all three of them. And when you do that, all three of those tools are selected at the same time. Isn't that cool? So that is called the Smart tool. So the Smart tool selects all three of those together and allows you to work with them all at the same time. So how's that going to work for real? Well, if we come back to this clip, just watch my cursor, see how it changes? Yeah, so it's all about where you hover in relation to a clip. So if you hover on the top half of the clip, you're going to have the selector icon there. If you go down to the bottom half, it changes to the grabber, and then you can drag things. So, and then if you just hover over the edge of a clip, it'll change to the trim clip. So anyway, so that's the Smart tool, and the Smart tool is probably the one you usually want to have selected the most. Just it's just where you're going to be working between all three of those things the most, so just plan to keep it selected. If you go next to the Smart tool, you have the Scrubber tool. And the idea behind the Scrubber tool is it's a way to allow you to... Oh, I just did it, sorry. But it's a way to allow you to audition the material in a clip before pushing play. So, you might wonder, oh, there's this one part of the song right there. I need to find it. So you can scrub over that section to find that exact part of the song. And it kind of dates back to when they used to record with tape machines, and they would take the tape machine and they'd rock the tape back and forth. And when you do that, you have this, this very warbly sound. But if you can do it slow and fast. So the slower you do it, the more warbly it sounds. But if you do it fast, then it sounds, you can hear the musical content and you can recognize what you're looking for. So anyway, it helps you to audition the clips and find what you're looking for. And then this tool over here is the pencil tool. Look at that, I drew a pencil, isn't that cool? And the pencil tool is very handy for when you're working in MIDI. So let me put the MIDI window up here. So here I am in MIDI. I can click with this pencil, and when I do that, it'll draw a MIDI note. At least it should draw a MIDI note when everything is working like it should. But anyway, so that's what the pencil is used for. So you can use it to draw in MIDI notes. Another thing the pencil is used for is automation. When we get into automation, for example, volume automation, maybe on the end of your song, you want to have a volume fade out. You can use your pencil to put in dots and to draw lines that will fade out. And so anyway, so you do use it occasionally and it comes in handy, but you don't use it all the time. But it's important to know where it is and what you do with it when it's there. Okay, the other thing to really get a good understanding of is up here in the top left corner, you have your modes, your edit modes. There are 4 different edit modes that you can edit your Pro Tools sessions in, and each of them does something different. Currently, I have the grid mode selected, and I think as a default, grid might be the one that you generally just want to use all the time. If you record and work in grid mode, then everything's going to be snapped to the grid, meaning timing-wise, the beat, right? The music has a beat. Everything will just lock in with the beat, and it will be right there where you need it to be. So right now, I have it in grid mode, and if you look at this red track down here, you'll see that the beginning of the track starts on a line. So there's these gray lines here. These gray lines are literally the grid. So if I drag this track and drop it, it's always going to snap to a point on the grid. And that's just very handy. That means that it's always in time with the beat and with the metronome click. So it's very useful to keep music in time with that. Now, right now, I have it set at quarter notes. So each of these gray lines you see is representing a quarter note in musical beats. And you can adjust that up here in the grid menu. See where it says grid up here in the top? Well, if I want to, I can click on that quarter note and I can change it to eighth notes. And when I do that, watch what happens to the gray lines down there. Now we have twice as many gray lines. See how many gray lines appear? Because now those gray lines are representing eighth notes. And let's try it. Oh, Here we are. Let's try one more time, and let's try it to 16th notes. Ooh, now we have lots of lines there. And now if I drag it in 16th notes, it's going to snap to where 16th notes are lining up instead of quarter notes like before. So anyway, so grid mode is very useful, and that's how it works. I'm going to go back to quarter note right here. Now, if you hover over the grid mode and you click on it again, you find that it changes to something called rel grid or relative grid. The first grid mode was absolute grid, and this is relative grid mode. And relative grid mode is really cool because it allows you to snap to the grid relative to where you want it to be. So it could be in between the lines, but it'll always stay at the same spot in between the lines. So I'm going to show you that in just a second. But first, I want to introduce slip mode to you. So slip mode is the next one over, and you click on that. And with slip mode engaged, you can then take your clip and you can move it in between the grid lines, because sometimes you want to do that, right? Sometimes there might be a reason where you don't want something to snap to the grid, and so you would need to go in between the lines. So you need to be in slip mode when you do that. So anyway, I'm in slip mode. I'm going to drag it in between the lines. So right now, it's not on a line, right? If I go back to relative grid mode right now and I drag it, it's going to snap to the next spot relative to where it was in between the lines. So with relative grid mode, you're snapping in between the lines to a specified spot that you get to decide. And so anyway, that's how relative grid mode works. So it can be very useful as well. And let's get it all back where we started. So anyway, that's relative, that's slip. Relative and slip are probably the most useful ones. You're probably going to use those ones the most. And usually you want to have it just in normal grid mode. It's where it does snap to the lines. But let's talk a little bit about shuffle now. And shuffle mode is going to come in really handy when you start editing. First of all, let me put it back in grid and let me do an edit for you. Let's say I was cutting this part of the song and there's a mistake here, so I'm editing it out. I'm going to make an insertion there, and then I'm going to come over here and make an insertion, and then I'm going to delete the mistake, right? So here I have it highlighted. Now I'm pushing delete. Boom, the mistake is gone, but there's all this space right here. Look at that. So what am I going to do about that space? Maybe I don't want that space because the information on each side of the clip is coherent enough. I want to hear all that together. So if you do this in shuffle mode, a really cool thing happens. So I'm going to slip into shuffle mode and do the exact same thing. I'm going to make an insert right here, cut it, insert right there, cut it. Now I'm going to delete the part I don't want, and watch what happens to the clip on the right. Watch what happens right here. Boom, it shuffles over. So it's exactly lined up with the clip on the left. So shuffle mode is very useful when you're editing things in Pro Tools because it will automatically line up the other half of what you're editing and shuffle it over to where it's going to line up to the end of the previous clip. Now you could just stay in grid mode, and you could drag it there as well, and that is always a way to do it. But you could use shuffle mode, and it could save you some time. And last of all is spot mode up here. And so here's spot mode. I'm going to zoom back out. Spot mode, when you click on a clip with spot mode, it's going to open a dialog box. And this dialog box that you see here allows you to strategically place the clip exactly where you want it. So here's the start point of the clip. Here's the end point. Right now, the clip that I have selected is starting on bar 9. Let's move it over and have it start on bar 12. So I'm just going to type a 12 in there. And then I'm going to push OK. And now our clip is on bar 12. Easy as that. So here's bar 12, and it's lining up right there at the beginning of bar 12. So anyway, spot mode can be very useful because it's going to line up things in exact specific spots that you want it to be for whatever reason. All right, so that is the edit modes. Like I said, usually you're going to want to leave it in grid mode and then work in slip mode when needed. But occasionally you're going to want to use shuffle, especially when editing. and then the spot mode when it seems like you need to put something in an exact spot. So let's move now and talk about the time scales and the rulers. So I'm going to zoom in up here to these numbers right here, and this is your time scale, and you can change what kind of numbers it has. Right now, the time scale is telling me bars and beats. So it's telling me that my song is on bar 9, beat 1. But if I want to, I can change it to minutes and seconds, and my, bar 9 is also where second 16 is. So at the moment, I've got it inserted in second 16. There's also time code, feet and frames, and samples. And those things are going to come in important for you when you're doing film scoring projects and you have video files in here, and you want to line up things according to how those time codes are going to go for you. There's samples. But anyway, bars and beats is a good one to use, and so is minutes and seconds. So sometimes really what you want is 2 counters here. So if you go to the bottom, it says show sub counter, and you can turn on your sub counter, and then your sub counter can have the bars and beats, and your top counter can have your main counter can have the seconds and minutes in it. So anyway, you can customize that, and you can insert those things as you want to. And then let's talk a little bit about rulers. Up above your tracks in your Pro Tools session is where the rulers are. Here's a green ruler, here's a brown ruler, and underneath that is a very dark kind of black or charcoal color ruler. If you follow them to the left, it'll tell you what that ruler is. So this green ruler is my tempo ruler. So here it's telling me it's tempo. The brown ruler is my key ruler, and if you follow the brown ruler out, you'll see it says default C major, so it's kind of keeping track of the key for me. And this charcoal black one is my markers ruler, which we'll be talking more about later. But anyway, it's possible to use that tempo ruler and to add a tempo change if you want to. And when you do that, the spot that my insert was at, it changed the tempo. So now the tempo says 80 beats per minute instead of 120. So those rulers are a way of controlling different parameters of your session. Now watch this. I'm going to make them disappear. Ooh, disappear. And what I'm doing there is I'm just pushing Option down on my keyboard. You push Option, and then you click on a ruler and makes them disappear. If you want them to reappear, come up here to where this little icon is right in the corner. There's a drop-down menu, and here you can pick which ruler you want to show. So let's put the tempo ruler back. Now tempo's back. Let's put the meter ruler. How about a chords ruler? How about the time code ruler? How about bars and beats ruler? I mean, really, there's a lot of rulers here that you could have showing in your Pro Tools session, but each ruler takes up space, and you don't really need all the rulers all the time. So it's important for you to customize which rulers you want to be showing at a time. So I'm going to push Option down again and delete some of them. And so we just have a few of them here. So anyway, that's your rulers, and they help you to control the session as well. So that kind of takes us to the end of the Pro Tools chapter or lesson 3. And so let's go ahead and get started with Pro Tools lesson 4, which is creating a session. To do that, I'm going to close this session, and then I'm going to open a new one. So I'm just going to come up here to File and go Create New. So when I do that, it pulls up something called the dashboard. And I mean, it says dashboard right there. You can read it. But this dashboard is kind of your gateway into a session, and it allows you to set up the basic parameters of a session that you want. Last week, we talked a lot about bit depth and sample rate, but there's some other things to be aware of here as well as you're creating things. First of all, you have an option of where to store it and what to create it from. Local storage is stored onto your hard drive, but there's also a collaboration and cloud backup. And when you do that, you're creating what's called a project, not a session. So a Pro Tools session is when you save something to the local storage to your computer. A Pro Tools project is when you save it on the cloud cloud saving or online. Now, project has some benefits. One of the benefits of a project is you could save something to your project and then go to a completely different computer with a different Pro Tools on it, and you could access your project there. So it's a way of if you're using multiple computers to complete a project, you can do that. You can do it from different locations and access your project there. Also, another cool thing is you can share your project with other Pro Tools users. So you could be collaborating with a friend across the country. You'll have the same session, and you can record your parts, and then the friend can have access to that session, and they can record their parts. So anyway, that's the benefits of it. But you do have to sign in to your Avid account to do that. See how it says sign in right here? And then I think that there's also a limit. Like, I think you can record or save 3 projects for free. But then if you want to save more than that, you have to start paying for it from Avid. So, but anyway, that's what the project is. But you may be fine with just doing a session. And if you need to share your session, you can just do it the old-fashioned way of making a zip file or putting it on a hard drive or something. Create from templates is kind of a cool thing. If you have that checked off, then you could go through any of these templates here, a template for jazz, a template for pop, and you could open it up and it will already have specific things in the session that are inherent in that session template or in that style, you might say. So it's kind of a cool way to start off your session to give you some ideas of where to start. But down here is where you're going to pick some of the parameters. We've talked about bit depth. We've talked about sample rate. I'm going to change my sample rate to 96. 2496 is a good standard for professional work. Now you get to choose the file type. The default file type is WAV. And just so you know, that is usually perfectly fine. And usually you just want to leave it as a WAV file for what you're working in. Occasionally, you might have a reason to change it to an AIFF file. And if you have that reason, go ahead and do it. But if you don't have a specific reason for it, you might as well just leave it as a WAV file. And another thing here is the in and out settings. This is controlling how you record in and out of your system. Generally, a good rule of thumb is to just keep it on the last thing used, because the last thing used is probably what you're going to want to use again. But what that usually is the stereo mix. So occasionally when you're starting out, you just want to have the stereo mix clicked there so that you can use that. But I'm going to keep mine as last used. And finally, take a look here at interleaved. Pro Tools records some files in stereo. And when something's recorded in stereo, there's actually 2 of them, right? There's 2 files. So it's very important if you're planning on recording in stereo, or maybe if you're not, because you might start a session and then halfway through you might be like, oh, I want a stereo file here. It's always a good idea to check interleaved and have that on, because that way when it's creating your stereo files, it will interleave them. It will lock them together. Without that, it's going to create multiple mono files of that track or that clip. And so unless you specifically want those multiple mono files for whatever, you should just leave it at interleaved, and then it will always have your stereo files kind of synced together. So anyway, I've got all that. Last of all, I can pick the location of where I'm saving things. And so, you can specify it by clicking on that. I do have to name this, so I'm going to name it Mick Song. How about that? I'll put a 1 here just in case I use that name again. And I'm going to push create. So I already have a session open, so it's asking me, do I want to save these changes to the example session? And I'll just push save. Yes, I want to save them. And so now I have a brand new Pro Tools session. It's all created. It's all ready to go. Now I can start making some music here. It's going to be awesome. So the first thing to do is to create some tracks. Right now there's no tracks here. And so I'm going to tell you the keyboard shortcut. Keyboard shortcuts are the best way to start doing things. You can do them faster. Shift, Command, N. Shift, Command, N. If you push those three down at the same time, you get the New Tracks dialog box. If you're using a Windows computer, I think it's Control, Shift, Control, N, because the Control and the Command are kind of the same things, but on the different computer types. So anyway, that's one way to access it. If you can't remember that, then you can always come up here to the menu, the track menu, and click on New. And when you do that, you get the New Tracks menu popping up. So anyway, in this New Tracks menu, there are some things that you can customize. First of all, you can customize if it's mono or stereo. So how do you know if you want mono or stereo? Well, that's something you need to start learning about, because there's advantages to both of them. Some tracks are just better as mono or can only function as mono. Some tracks are better as stereo, and it's kind of a preference thing, but it's something that you get to choose as you're creating that track. So let's do this. Let's create a mono track here, and I'm going to add another track to it. Let's have the second one be stereo so we can see both of them. Now the next thing you get to choose is what type of track you're creating. Notice that the default track is audio track. So if you're planning to record and capture the sound from a live instrument, then this is the track you need. So if you want to record a guitar, you want to record a singer, a vocalist, if you want to record a violin, a piano, drums, what you need is audio tracks. These are the tracks for recording live instruments. But there's other tracks to choose from, right? There's the aux input, master, VCA master, MIDI, instrument track. So let's talk about each of these other tracks as well, and let's create some of them. So I'm going to create another track. I'm going to keep it mono. In this one, I'm going to have it be a MIDI track or instrument track. I have my keyboard here. I want to record sounds in it. So where does that come from? I'm going to choose instrument track. Now, a lot of times when you record with a keyboard, you think you're going to use MIDI, and it gets confusing because there is MIDI tracks. So your MIDI tracks are for your external MIDI controller sounds. So if you have a keyboard and it has or a synthesizer and it has a bank of sounds in there, and you want to capture those sounds from that MIDI keyboarder, then you need a MIDI track for that. But what often happens in Pro Tools and other digital audio workstations is you work from plugins. And plugins are the digital world of keyboard sounds that you can access. And usually that's what you're looking for when you're just trying to use your controller and plug it into your computer. So you want to create an instrument track for that. Anyway, and then some other tracks are, oh, there it is. So there's also the aux tracks, aux input, the VCA master, and then the master fader. Aux inputs are for when you're adding like an effect to your instruments. Like let's say you want to add delay or reverb. You're going to create an aux input track for that, and then you would add delay to that. And then from that track, you can channel that delay to the other tracks that need it. The VCA master is for when you're making submixes. So let's say you just recorded a drum set, and that drum set took 10 tracks of your session. You can take those 10 tracks and route them into a VCA master to create a submix. And then when you control that VCA master, it's going to control all 10 of those tracks, the volume level of all 10 of them at the same time. So it allows you to group certain tracks together and control them as a group. But every track should have this, a master fader on it. The master fader is the ultimate fader of the whole track, where you raise or lower it, and it's going to make the whole thing softer or louder. So you always need to put a master fader in your session. And after you've picked that and chosen what you want, you then push create, and it creates all your tracks. Notice the different colors of tracks. The audio tracks are blue. The instrument track is brown. The aux track is green. And the master fader track is red. So those colors represent the different types of tracks that you just created. The very first thing you should do after you create your tracks is name them. So I'm going to double click on audio 1. When I do that, I get a dialog box that allows me to name that track. Now I can name it and then I could push OK, and then I could go down to the next track and double click on it and name it and push OK, and I could do that for every track, right? That's going to work. Oh, that name already exists. But that could take some time because you're doing it over and over again. So another way you could do it is name the first track. I'm going to call it Guitar 1. And then I am going to, instead of push OK, I'm going to push Command on my keyboard, and then the arrows. See these arrows right here, the up, down, left, right. I'm going to push Command and push right. And when I do that, it automatically jumps to the second track, and I can then name the second track. I'm going to do it again, and now it's going to go to the third track. I'm going to call this track Organ. I'm going to do it again. Now I'm down on my aux track. I'm going to call it Delay. That'll be my delay track. And now I'm going to push Command and right arrow again. And now it takes me down to that master track. It says Master 1. I'm just going to call it Master. It says Master 1. That's not a big deal. And at the end of all that, you push OK, and then the dialog box goes away. And now you have each of your tracks named. Okay, and so that's kind of it for creating a session. From here, you can go ahead and start recording your sounds and recording your songs. I did forget one small thing. So here's one last thing to just talk about really quick at the end. So some tracks have samples, some have ticks. So what is a sample-based track and what is a tick-based track? Sample-based tracks are the real audio tracks. So it's when you're dealing with real sound from real instruments that you're capturing, that you've recorded, that exist in the real world. That's time base is in the sample time base. But when you're working in the world of MIDI, which we do a lot of, we call that the ticks time base. And it's called ticks. I know that's a gross like insect as well, but it's called ticks because when you have the MIDI editor window open and you're working in that window, each mark in that window could be called a tick. Anyway, because you make little marks in the boxes and stuff. So with MIDI, you're seeing all these little bars and all these little marks. Anyway, those are called ticks. So, all right, so that ends it for this video today. Thank you for coming to class, and please let me know if you have any questions about anything, and I will see you next time.